Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. Windows are the eyes of the home, and how we choose to frame them shapes not only our rooms, but also our moods, our light, and our connection to the world outside. Around the world, cultures have approached window treatments in different ways, each reflecting history, climate, and values. Welcome back to Your Home by Design. I'm Nico, and today's episode is part 3 of our Home by Countries series. We're diving into the psychology of windows and exploring how 3 cultures, Japan, France, and Scandinavia, designed their windows. From Japan's poetic harmony with nature to France's dramatic layered drapery to Scandinavia's relaxed, light-filled approach, you'll discover not only how these styles differ, but how you can elevate your own home through intentional design choices. And as always, I'll be weaving in the Paro lens, design psychology, and neuroaesthetics so you can see not just the style, but the science behind why these choices matter for your health and your well-being. If you were to grab a magazine right now, or even just Google, say, the best living room design, and look at the images that come up. So if you're looking online, what you'll see is a collection of images from some of the best interior design magazines and online resources. So when I do a quick search, I see images from Veranda magazine, Architectural Digest, Elle Decor. Now, if I were to narrow in and focus on those images, specifically looking at the window treatments, and ask, do these rooms have drapes or do they have some form of a window treatment? How have they been incorporated? Now, most of them will have some form of dressing on their windows. And imagine looking in these rooms and taking that away. So taking that aspect of the design out of what are you left with, right? How does that impact the look of the room, where your eye goes, how things are coordinated and pulled together, and then where your attention goes if your eye is drawn to the window, what you're seeing beyond that. Now imagine just removing those treatments. See, for a room to feel really complete, for it to feel well designed and even luxurious, and when I say luxurious, I don't mean like it has to be overloaded and opulent. It can be subtle and textural, but there's intention, and intentional design choices are really felt. It's not an accident that a well-designed space feels really good. Well-designed spaces have impact. Now, if there's a room that doesn't have drapery or some window treatment, then you have to ask, what is the reason for that? In well-designed spaces, that reason is intentional because it wasn't an afterthought. It wasn't a forgotten detail where they just, we didn't factor that in. It was at some point in the process, in the design process, a deliberate decision. So today I've selected a few countries where they approach this differently through style and application. But first, before we look at those countries, I want to just talk a little bit about the psychology of windows and how it impacts a room and impacts us as we relate to it and respond to it. So what is the purpose of a window? And I want to start by reading an excerpt from an online magazine called Arc Eyes, Timeless Architecture. And the article I'm going to be reading this from is called The Language of Windows, How Architects Use Openings to Communicate. Okay, so it says, windows are the eyes of architecture, revealing not just what's outside, but also the architect's intention and the building's spirit. Far from being openings in a wall, windows serve as powerful design tools that shape spatial experiences, elicit emotions, and convey meaning. Through their placement, proportion, and materiality, architects use fenestration, so that's windows, to challenge conventions from narratives and engage in dialogues about architecture, culture, and society, whether framing grand landscapes, distorting reality, or evoking historical memory, windows can potentially transform how we interact with space and light. And I just love that. Isn't that an amazing description of the impact of windows architecturally and the impact that that has on us and how we relate to our spaces? We know that windows play such a vital role in our homes because they're really the way we connect to the outdoors, the way we let the light in, the way we let air in, and the way we just are connecting visually to the outside world, whatever's going on the outside of our homes, the way we are interacting with that is through our windows. So the way we dress them is very important. And that can add to the look of the window, the function of the window. It can help draw the eye out. They can help the light dance in as it comes through, playing on shape and movement. It can also create movement with the breeze coming through as well. So interacting with that light is important to our circadian rhythms. Seeing the outside and being drawn to look out, if it's daylight, if it's the morning, if it's evening, all of that is impacting how our circadian rhythms are responding. It's like cues and signals to our body saying where we are in our day. Window treatments can also help us just to feel safe, right? To feel secure and cozy. I'm sure you've had an experience where you're sitting on a sofa and it's cold and dark outside and you just want to go close the windows. You want to close yourself off from the outside. You want to detach from seeing that dark and cold environment because you're at night and maybe you've got the fire going. So you just want to be cozy and warm and feel secure. And a way to do that is to close them up. It's also a bit of a ritual at night. If you are drawing the curtains and it's signaling to your brain and your body that it's evening, that physical moment of closing those drapes can signal to your body, this is your little ritual and you know what's coming next. It's calming. I know for us at night, often right before dinner, I will close up our windows because where we live, there's a lot of kids in our neighborhood. And often if we have kids still out when we're about to sit down for dinner, our kids are constantly looking out the window to see what's happening outside, who's out there, who's still playing, what's going on. So I will close down the windows so that they can stay focused on their dinner and we can enjoy a family dinner. But also it just sets the mood for all of us. It tells us all, okay, we're transitioning to our evening and our evening routines. So we're winding down, we're getting ready for bed and for sleep, relaxation. So I just love that moment where I go and I close the windows because it's time to focus on dinner, focus on the family, and start the unwinding for the night. I was reading this study recently that was looking at nature and how it impacts us when we view it through a window. So what are the effects on our health and our well-being? And yeah, the results basically indicated that there was consistent positive effects. So there was lower stress levels, enhanced cognitive function. There was things like a reduction in symptoms of depression and just overall life satisfaction. So I just thought that was really interesting because we do know that when we engage in nature, when we go for walks in nature and we spend time outdoors, it's really important for our health and our well-being. But I was interested to see this study because it looked at the impact of interacting with nature through a window, not necessarily being out in nature. So if being connected to natural elements, even from inside, viewing them from our windows, like things like trees or landscapes or a mountain in the distance, if we know this to be beneficial to our health and we want to draw the eye out and up in order to engage with what's going on outside, then we want to add some interest to frame that view so that it adds impact and it does draw our eye up and out. So let's look at how some countries do this. So if you look at a window, I want to just frame it in the way of like you have a blank wall in your house and you don't put a piece of art on it. There's nothing, there's no interest there. There's no detail. It's just a blank space. And then you add a piece of art there. And that art is, let's say it's the right size, it's at the right height, it's doing all of the right things. And so what are you going to do? You're going to engage with that piece of art. You're going to look at that piece of art to inform some of the other choices that you make in the room, from some of the colors to the textures, the style, even the style of the art itself might inform the style of furniture you choose. If it's a really modern piece versus a very traditional piece. So you might start to try to balance those two and bring them in. So this piece of art impacts everything else in the space. And if we look at windows in this same way, if we start to look at our windows and the view beyond as like similar to what we would a piece of art, in the way that we should look at it to inform the choices we make inside, and the colors, the way that the light comes in, shapes and things that you're seeing in the distance. I always say, when you choose colors for the interior, make sure you test it in many different lights and on different walls, because even your neighbor's house is going to impact the tone of paint color on the inside. So that's what I mean by trying to draw that connection between the outside and the inside and let it sort of inform it in a way. So today I've selected Japan, France, and Scandinavia. And when we talk about nature and connecting with it through our windows, Japan does this really well. So I wanted to start with Japan. So Japan is really about minimal when it comes to windows. You're not going to see fabric around windows. Typically, what you're going to see is just how to maximize nature, really. So they prioritize connecting with nature through architecture by the way of windows. Even, in more highly densely locations, obviously that's going to impact it a little bit because it's harder, even if you prioritize a garden view and expansive windows looking out onto a tree or engaging with nature in some way. In urban settings, it is slightly different, but the ethos is very much about prioritizing that connection with nature. Just as a side, the act of forest bathing, so going for a walk, it's called Shinrin-yoku. I love it. I've known that term for many years. I think it's such a beautiful thing. So in terms of architecture, windows are really designed to frame trees, courtyards, or even just a single plant. So the emphasis is really on natural light as well as ventilation. And there's this term in Japan, and it's called shake, which is called borrowed landscape. And I just recently learned this, and it really is so lovely because basically what it does is in your garden, if there is something in the distance, a structure or a mountain or a tree, just something that's not yours. Essentially, you borrow that. You borrow that into the layout of your garden. So you might use nature, you might use trees or your plants to frame it so that it actually draws your eye to that aspect and it allows that connection. So I love you're borrowing that. You're saying, oh, that's a nice feature off in the distance. I'm going to utilize that and then make my garden speak to that. So it's very much on the interior about how you're connecting to the exterior and the landscape and the views and the greenery. It's all very important. And on the interior, in Japanese architecture, it's very minimalistic. It's pared down. There's things like the tatami mats but on the windows, what you see, again, it's pared down as well. You're not going to see fabric and lots of drapery, but you will see things like shoji screens, which are wood-framed screens, and they're made of washi paper, which is traditionally handmade paper, which makes it very durable and long lasting, and it's a natural fibers, and it's semi-transparent. So these screens are sort of floor to ceiling, and they're fixed to tracks in the floor, and you can imagine they're kind of like shutters in a way, interior shutters that just slide to conceal the window and then slide back to open it up and allow you to see out the window. But they're beautiful in the sense that they just diffuse natural light. So in the day, you will see light come through. It's semi-transparent, so you just get this soft play of light. And at night, bouncing off the light from if there's light on the inside or the outside. So there's shadow play that happens, and it diffuses the light and it adds a lovely ambiance, but it's very natural. And it really is about closing it off when you need to and then opening it up and engaging with nature. But there's detail. They are, even though they're not fabric, there is a level of detail to them that's very beautiful. The fact that they are handmade and they're framed in wood, there's that materiality to it that just adds so much to the space. So if you want to take something from this look, I would say a little tip would just be to not overdress your window, especially when you have a beautiful view, but to let nature be the focal point and add just enough detail so that your eye still moves to that and that you still get to experience, the ambiance that something like washi paper would give you. So the next country I want to talk about is France. Being that architecture in France is more historic, there are certain architectural elements like tall windows, deep set windows, and patio doors that often lead out to a balcony or a courtyard. So there is a connection to the outdoors, but it's often dressed. And I think in France, they have really perfected how to use drapery as a focal point in combination with the window styles they've really mastered that romantic look. And there are a few ways that it's done more commonly in France. So the treatments they use tend to be softer, and they filter light and frame it rather than block it out. So, what we just learned in Japan was that it's either closed off and filtered or opened up completely. Whereas in France, it's softer and there's fabric and there's layering that happens in France. Layering is really key. It's very common to see multiple treatments on a window. So you might have the shutters outside, which is a very typical exterior treatment in France. And then on the inside, you'll see shears and then drapes over top for evenings. You'd also have linen drapes or Roman shades layered in depending on which room it is. In like Parisian apartments, you're going to have the floor to ceiling windows, which are dressed in more sort of heavier silks and velvets or patterned fabrics. There's definitely a cultural emphasis on grandeur in some regards and just being really elegant and romantic. Drapery, definitely, if you want that sense of grandeur and elegance, drapery is such a beautiful way to do that. I think people who don't typically love drapery, in the sense of like full drapes, they might find it sort of too stuffy, or they might feel like it's too heavy or it's too much. And I think that depends on a lot of factors for your windows, for the room, for the style that you have. But certainly drapery doesn't have to be. It actually can draw your eye up. And that's something that you see in France, is that it does really become that focal point, and it really adds a level of interest and it draws your eye to the window. And just to add a little neuroaesthetic tip here, but layering textures really does enhance the perception of richness and warmth. So when you do a lot of layering, it helps you feel cozy. It helps you, just that sense of richness and warmth. And something I wanted to mention quickly before I go on to Scandinavia is, alongside with this episode, I've put together a free window treatment cheat sheet. It's just a really simple guide, and it's just professional tips to basically help you just get your windows right, with the style that you like and what your goals are. So yeah, just head over to the link in my Instagram bio. It's at your Paro, and that is YOURPARO, and sign up. I'll send it straight to your inbox. Okay. So let's talk about Scandinavia. Well, window design isn't created really to be a focal point in the way that the French drapery might frame a window or the Japanese architecture might capture a garden view. But instead, the benefit is really subtlety. So by keeping the window treatments really relaxed and unfussy, the design lets the light itself kind of more or less become the feature. I think a lot of Scandinavian design is light and bright and not overly fussy, right? The window sort of disappears into the room, which kind of calms the space, and the eye can rest on things like textures and materials rather than being pulled toward really elaborate fabric. So it really comes down to the aesthetic. It's a different aesthetic. And that's why we have different design styles, because the way that we approach it and the aesthetic is different. So windows and the way we treat windows factors into that as well. So this approach, this design style creates a really relaxed feel. It's a very welcoming, approachable style. So even though the treatments are very simple, it's still a thoughtful element. So things like a soft linen panel, a really light pale colored roller shade, or a delicate sheer. These details just add enough style and layering to keep the space from feeling bare, right? So back to at the beginning of the episode, I mentioned how if you imagine a well-designed space, or if you look online and then you imagine taking the window treatment away and what's left. And I think that with this is, even though it's pared down and it's simplistic, it's still considered. This is still a detail that was weighed. It was just decided to be more subtle than anything else. So it's really a balance here of function and beauty. So it's practical that it filters the light and it adds that level of texture and airiness and comfort, but it's understated where it kind of keeps that real Scandinavian design sensibility. So the benefit to the overall design is really that it can make a space feel larger and brighter and calmer, because there isn't a lot of visual elements competing for attention. And it does allow for connection to the outdoors, and it still does allow light to come in. So the types of window treatments is the sheer curtains, lightweight fabrics, and just sort of minimal coverage. It's not that layered opulent feel. It's very pared down, like I said, and just minimal. Something, if you wanted to take something from this style, is just to use translucency to invite the light. So you want to just keep the palette soft and textural, not a lot of pattern, and very tonal. And the whole thing is just to highlight it with just subtle details to add to this airy, bright feel, that translucency, which is going to let a little bit of light in. Okay, so I just want to run through just some quick little tips to get your window treatments right. So the first thing that I want to mention, and this is really important, is just when we're talking about proportion and fullness. I think most people, when they go to the store and they buy store-bought drapes, and I've done this, and they bring them home, and it's like, okay, well, there's 2 panels in this package. And you have to remember that you actually need to buy more than one package, because it's a measurement. It's a measurement based on the window size. So how is a store going to know and be able to offer every single window width? They can't. So they have like an average or a typical measurement that they use, and it has nothing to do with your window. They have not factored in anyone's width. They've just said, here's the width of the fabric, here's what we're going to sell, and it's up to you to make it look right. Okay, so what's the rule of thumb? So you want the fullness to be enough. And I would say like a general rule would be 2 to 2.5 times width. So if you imagine your window and you take a measurement of the window, the width of your window, you want to times that by 2 or 2.5, and that's going to give you the amount of fabric that you need. And this is just important because it then can become a focal point. It's got the right weight and proportion to the room. It adds that sense of weight and scale to the space, which is really important to help it feel elevated and help it feel custom and all of those things. So that's one way. If you want to make your space feel a little bit more luxurious, this would be a really important factor. And this doesn't matter whether you're going with a transparent fabric that you can see through, or a heavier weight fabric like a velvet. You can still have the right fullness. You can still have a lot of fullness with a lightweight drapery. It's still going to have that sense of airiness and lightness to the space, even if you have a little more fullness, because that sense of lightness comes from the selection of the fabric and not necessarily the fullness, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is you want to hang your drapes higher and wider than the window to really elongate the walls and create that sense of luxury. So what we call stack backs. So when you open your window, where does the drape sit on the wall? You want that to actually stack back onto your actual wall. You want that so that basically it's not taking up any of your window, because in order to let that light in and to really engage with nature outside of your window, you need to be able to open that wide up and have that drapery sit on the wall side. So if you want to increase the visual height and the substantial weight of a window, so say you have a fairly small window that has quite a lot of space above it, you could utilize valances and pelmets, which a pelmet is basically a structured kind of box, more or less a box that's upholstered that sits above your drapery, and a valance it's more lightweight. And anyway, but they just kind of can frame the light and hide hardware, and it really does elevate a space, and it can make it feel a little bit more high end. So this is one of the things that you can do to do that. It can be a little bit more formal. Pelmets do tend to be more formal. So if you like more traditional design, that could be a good choice. The next thing I want to mention is just your fabric choices, and just to bear in mind that your choice of fabric on your windows really does dictate style. It dictates what sort of vibe the room has, the ambiance, the amount of light. So just bear that in mind. So heavier weight fabrics like velvets or wool, they're going to add a different feel to the space. So it's going to have more depth and add a little bit more drama. It might even draw the eye a little bit, just because the visual weight of those fabrics are heavier. The actual weight of those fabrics are heavier as well, but it really does add that visual weight to a space versus more of a lightweight fabric like linen or cotton and very light sheers, which is going to give you that airiness and that calm and that lightness. So just bear that in mind, that your fabric choice, whether it's a pattern, whether it's a solid, the texture on it, the weight of the fabric itself is really going to play a role in the overall design. And then the other thing is Roman shades are going to give you a little bit more of a tailored look. Roman shades are really versatile too. So you can put them in any window. If you're somebody who doesn't love heavier drapes or a little bit more of a formal feel, if you will, Roman shades could be a great thing, because it's a chance to add the texture and add fabric to your windows, but they're very versatile and you can put them in any space. And then the other thing is just a reminder, connection to nature. If your window does frame trees, if you can see the sky and resist the urge to overdo it, to over decorate. Sometimes no treatment is the best treatment, like we saw in Japan, but again, there has to be a reason for it, and it should be factored in, and that decision needs to be very deliberate and intentional. And the other thing is tailored drapes. So if you buy store-bought drapery and they're too long, you could take them in and have them tailored. And that's going to just add that level of custom touch to your space. Yeah. And just want to add a few neuroaesthetic insights. Windows are dynamic stimuli. So it's an opportunity to interact with light, right? The light shifts through the day and it provides the circadian cues. So don't forget that there's a reason for windows in our home, and it's to let the light in and to let the air in, and for us to engage with the outside, which can help our circadian cues. Okay, so as I wrap up today's episode, I just want to leave you with a few key takeaways. Windows are dynamic design tools. They frame light, nature, and atmosphere, directly impacting your circadian rhythms, mood, and sense of connection. Japan teaches us restraint. Let nature be the focal point. A single frame tree or courtyard can act as living artwork. France shows us the power of layering, shutters, sheers, and dramatic drapery that adds richness, elegance, and warmth. Scandinavia proves simplicity isn't boring. Minimal treatments maximize daylight, creating calm, approachable, and deeply livable spaces. Professional tip: always size your treatments correctly. Hang drapery higher and wider. Choose fabrics intentionally. And remember, sometimes the best treatment is little treatment. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember, windows aren't just openings, they're invitations to light, mood, and connection. The way you frame them can either uplift your home or hold it back. If you found this episode inspiring, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who loves their home. Make sure you follow along on Instagram at yourparo, YOURPARO, for daily design tips and behind the scenes insights. And join me on my personal account at bynico.space. That's bynico.space, BYNICO.SPACE, for a more creative, moody look at design and life. You can also head to yourparo.com for free guides and resources to start transforming your home today. And don't forget to grab that cheat sheet over at Your Paro. Link in bio. Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the Support the Show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.